Rooten is a game I enjoyed heavily. It has gameplay elements and light combat, but ultimately it is an atmosphere-focused narrative game that takes around 2 hours to beat. It is a Lovecraft-inspired original story, and naturally a large part of the enjoyment comes from how the world's presented, so I highly recommend playing the game instead of watching this video. But for those of you who don't want to spend the time or the money and just want to listen to a good horror story, this video is for you. Rooten is developed by Amortiz Games, and they did an incredible job. Rooten can be played with different things occurring based on what you do, but ultimately ends up near the same. To be concise, I'll be detailing my playthrough to tell the general story from beginning to end. Rooten begins with the protagonist speaking to their boss. Their boss tells them about a research station they have out in the forest. It's isolated from any roads or communities for around 100 miles. The type of business they run is never actually stated, but it seems like a general corporate job from the boss's business casual clothing and larger body type. The boss tasks the protagonist with going to the station to research the mushrooms growing around the area of the woods and bring back a sample and provide notes about them, stating specifically that the mushrooms aren't special, but he wants one to examine anyway. Each week, a helicopter goes to the research outpost for supply trips, so the protagonist's trip will last 1 week total. The protagonist ends up agreeing and gets flown out, beginning the game. The game starts on the first day at an open clearing in the woods where the helicopter dropped the protagonist off at. He moves forward through the trees, twittering with birds towards what looks like wooden cabins. Upon reaching the cabins, he realizes that they're all empty, almost seemingly abandoned, which is weird because this is clearly the outpost and there should have been, at the very least, one person stationed here. But no one, not even a sound. Looking around the area more though, he finds mushrooms. Specifically, the mushrooms he was tasked with looking for, and they do appear to be semi-ordinary, just out in the open. And that's strange as to why he got sent here just for these. Shaking it off because nobody was around and it was still daylight, the protagonist decides to go deeper into the woods to look around. Passing a loud flowing waterfall and over a bridge, he comes to a table with sheets of paper on it. There seems to be writing on them, but nothing that can be read too well. He decides to leave a note detailing how the forest makes him uncomfortable ever since he arrived. He doesn't know why he left that note, he thinks to himself, but he decides to continue moving forward regardless. After passing tree by tree and scaring away some birds along the path, he comes to another open clearing. In this clearing there is something hideous. It's hard to tell from afar, so he decides to go closer. Upon further inspection, there is something akin to a large phosphorescent cocoon. It's just sitting there on top of a dirt mound. It looks alien and wrong, and even pulsing. Directly above it, there stands a wooden idol, seemingly made to look like the image of a person, but taller with sticks coming out of the head. Not only that, but it looks in motion, while something remaining completely still. This is clearly something more, but he's not sure what he's actually seeing. There's something going on in this forest, more than meets the eye. These aren't normal, and even if they can be explained by animals or a human making the wooden idol, the protagonist needs to find out why he stumbled upon these so close to the outpost. He tries to continue, but large overgrowth blocks his next path, causing him to go south deeper into the woods instead. The next area he comes to is one of a circle outcropping. There isn't much of substance besides more sticks, bushes, and the birds being as loud as ever. Although the scene is getting a bit darker as night is coming. In the center of the path is yet another one of the cocoons that seemingly pulse. Upon closer inspection, these don't seem as random as once thought. Without much time to worry, he keeps pushing forward and runs into a third and final cocoon along the path. He gives it one last check for abnormalities before picking up his pace towards the final area. The air is much heavier at this point and night is falling quick. He would need to get to shelter soon. In the back of the last wooded clearing, there is a large skeleton. Not of a normal animal, it has the physical markings of a large, elongated deer. And the protagonist feels the skull's glowing eyehole staring directly at him. Almost sure that there is something there, even though he can clearly see it's not. Scared of the skull and wanting this day to be over as quick as possible, the protagonist backtracks to the outpost, as it becomes pitch black and near impossible to see in the dark forest. He does not know what lies out there, but he does not want to know the things he saw and how they terrifyingly might bear some connection to one another. There is clearly something wrong with this forest, he thinks to himself, noting that all he has to do is survive the rest of the week. Feeling fear and confusion from the day's events and whatever that thing was, he hurries back to the outpost for the night, deciding to use one of the houses to stay at for the week until his escape out of whatever is happening here arrives. Reaching one of the houses, he grabs his typewriter and paper, journaling his findings and what he went through today. He is determined to look around more through the woods in hopes of searching for any people when morning comes, but before that, he tries to get what sleep he can. In the middle of the night, still dark out, loud knocks come from the door. The protagonist goes to open it anxiously. At the door is a man, specifically a ratty, homeless-looking man. He has a camo vest and tattered clothing, his hair gray, and his eyes look devoid of life. The homeless man greets the protagonist. He is apparently the forester of the woods living nearby. His name is Igor. Igor claims that multiple people still live here, we just haven't found them yet. He tells the protagonist to look in the woods if he wants to find the others. The conversation is short, but the man turns away. Following the man outside, Igor continues muttering to himself that he can't go into his home because it's not his anymore, for whatever that means. But one thing is clear, this man is not sane. Though the lead on others being around is hope, and hope is enough to go on for the day. The protagonist ventures out once again. The first stop this time is the table in the woods with the pieces of paper on it. He looks at the thought he wrote down the day before and it seems someone replied. A cheerful sounding person telling him to make himself at home in this forest. He writes this person back about Igor coming to this house and asks what's wrong with him in these woods. All he can do is wait for another response for now. Continuing, he finds the same cocoon down the path, thankfully no different, but there seems to be a little wooden marker on the path that wasn't there before. No, multiple of them. And beyond them is the same wooden statue of a half-man, half-creature. This time in a new place, almost as if it's walking somewhere on its own. But it's not moving. It also looks different, maybe larger, with hideous plants growing from it. Nearing the second cocoon, the protagonist hears noises, not just of the birds and insects, but of a creature's clawing voices. As he gets closer to the cocoon, his heart beats quicker, but he calms down and keeps looking around for all the discrepancies he may have missed yesterday. A new path opened up, in another clearing as well. Not much here, but dark gray grass like everywhere else and the sound of nature. At the very end, near the center, there's an axe upon a log. Naturally, he grabs it as quick as possible, finally getting a little sense of security knowing he has a weapon just in case anything goes wrong. Jumping down back onto the naturally made dirt paths around the area, he hears something in the distance. It sounds like a tree, but not. It sounds like if you put fans up to a tree branch from different directions, quickly moving. He nears the noise and finds something strange. No, strange is too light of a word to describe what he sees to himself. It's a moving small tree, like a man, but not a man and not a tree. It looks far smaller than the idol above and much closer to his own body size. It's coming after him. The protagonist, with his newly acquired axe, takes a step forward and swings at the abomination, but it doesn't fall. The moving tree thing swipes with what looks like an arm back. He barely dodges and is able to swipe with his axe twice more, and it falls to a pile of sticks. Night is falling quickly once again on the second day after the battle with the creature, so the protagonist rushes back to the house, completely and purposely not checking on the deer skeleton this time, though he stakes out the area surrounding his home just in case of danger. Down south from the research outpost, there is a disgusting stench. He follows the scent and comes to a mutilated dog. Covered in blood and webbing with a white skin to it, looks decayed but recently killed. For whatever reason, something compelled him in this moment to reach his hand out and touch it. The protagonist doesn't want to try to understand why he just did what he did. It must be from the craze of the day and general tiredness. Actively disregarding the obscurity of what just happened, he turns around from the mess. Returning home, something is waiting for him. Just like whatever that tree creature was, something very similar to it is standing very close to home. It looks near the same in body stature, but it's made of that webbing that's all around the cocoons and in spots around the ground. There's human mimicking flora and fauna in this forest, and they're all hostile. Once again, the protagonist readies his axe, scraping by with minimal injuries against the webbed thing, this time without thought, deciding that this marked the end of today's events. No, it marked what he could handle for the moment. Back to the typewriter, he writes everything he encountered. The living beings that look like human plants, the hatchet that saved his life, the pale color to everything that lives, the people in the woods, the dog, all of it. Finish with that, and getting however much sleep he was able to, once again, knocks at the door echo in the dark. This time at the door is another man. a different man than Igor. The man says his name is Dima. Dima says he's a biologist and Kate's husband. He tells protagonist that when he arrived here, the forest already remained, mentioning something called the cycle, how the cycle is already in motion and we have a place in it. He also mentions that voices spoke to him about something called the Forest of Lights. The last thing he leaves us with before he departs is a thought that rings in our protagonist's head. He questions our role in the cycle, and it being the reason we arrived here. The cycle dictated it. The protagonist rushes to the table with the note in the woods quickly this time, and there is in fact a response. His pen pal says to not be afraid of her boys. She says it in a very happy tone as usual. She claims they're not the fighting type and adds a joke saying, unless they get hungry, haha. The protagonist writes back and asks where this person is and why they are hiding. How do they meet? Putting the pencil down, it's time for the daily checks. And not the best results to start off with. His heartbeat grows louder and louder as the object in the distance gets closer. The same cocoon we've seen over and over has finally hatched. It's broken from the top and nothing resides in it. Just the sinking feeling of what could be and the visual disgust of the shell remains. The second cocoon is thankfully fine and unchanged. Although, if the first one hatched, it's likely this one will too. The forest has much more webbed plants everywhere today. A scary number of them are littered around. Going down familiar trails leads to smaller cocoons, and for good measure, he takes his axe to them. The first one he breaks, something does indeed fall out. A body. Not of a human, but of what looks like an abnormal dog skull with black tendril reminiscent legs. A chill. Now we come across Igor once again out in a dark gray clearing near the southern part of the woods. He tells us that he repaired the bridge and there was no access to it the first days we arrived here. Interested in the new location, we march onward. But in that direction is what he avoided yesterday, the deer. This time it's not a deer skeleton, it's more insectoid and long, straight upwards and writhing with small bones coming out of the sides. It's alien and foreign to any animal body at this point. Near the structure is another small plant. The protagonist draws close to take a look and finds a heart pulsating on top like a bulb. A literal heart. It's hard to tell if it's human or animal. He draws closer to it and is attracted to whatever the living plant is. Once again, just like with a dog, without thinking, he grabs the heart out from the bulb and takes a bite. Shocked at himself, he brings his mind back to his senses. He feels himself going mad. Unsure of what's happening to his head and not being able to dissuade himself with logic anymore, he finally reaches the bridge. Nothing too special on the other side, but a long spiral path with more heart plants leading to another blocked off area. Giving into whatever urge he had before, he takes a couple more bites of them, maybe in hopes that he just needed food. Maybe in hopes that they'll bring clarity. He doesn't know why, but he's pulled toward them. He stops himself and returns back home afterward. It's near pitch black now with the sounds of swampy gushing and crows cawing. He checks the dog carcass again before bed. The dog's body is growing out of the ground, like it is a plant and it's webbed into the forest. Once again reaching his hand out, the protagonist pets it and feels the dog alive and happy at the touch. He doesn't know how he felt that, but he knew. Before he has time to think, two things come rushing out of the darkness toward him. It looks like a live version of what was ever in the small cocoons. Small creatures resembling large-headed dogs with small tendrilled bodies, blackish brown with multiple eyes. True monstrosities moving much quicker than him. He swings with his axe and takes them both out in one single strike. Evading the danger yet again, he rushes home. He details the thoughts and feelings he had today, the forest and how it's changing around him, the life inside the forest and how the people he's finding don't think anything strange. They have plants growing from them too. They could even appear dead, but they're very much alive. The protagonist also notes that on the map there lies a radio station near the swamps, and he wants to make it his goal to get to it, but it's been blocked off this entire time. Being a quicker way out of here, he makes it his next mission to find it once the day comes. In the dead of night never failing to occur, more knocks at the door come keeping him from a sound sleep. This time, the creepiest looking man greets him yet. Long, pale, skinny, and seemingly covered in mold and decay, a man presents himself as Alexander, the leader of the pack. He looks much more regal than the other two villagers, but nonetheless disgusting. The protagonist notes that he doesn't look human. He's not. Alexander tells us that we are part of the pack as well. He tells us of the gifts that ripen in the forest, which could only mean those heart fruits that we bit into today. The forest is preparing something. breeding something as it changes, he claims. Whatever he could mean doesn't matter. What matters right now is the radio station. Trying not to give heed to becoming one of the so-called pack and eating the fruits, we push ourselves out of the door and start our search for salvation. Here's where the discoveries start to slow. The forest continues through the cycle and keeps changing. Igor, Alexander, and Dima are more easily found walking through the dark woods now, almost as if they were ready for something. Coming to the table of notes, the reply for today is simple. The pen pal says that today is the day we meet. Come to the part of the woods that was blocked by bramble for so long in the north. Before heading there, the protagonist also writes for his own sanity now, but the pack and how these things aren't people anymore. There's something else entirely. Whatever darkness consumed them, they're long past what they used to be. They're part of the forest now. Having a lead for information for the first time in a while, he reaches where the moving bramble used to lie. It is indeed cleared away, not surprising at this point with how quickly the forest moves things around like it's nothing. There are much more enemies today than there were before, making it much harder to look around with ease. Finding the radio station will be a road marked with strife from here on out. Searching the area beyond the bramble is another hilly land, and at the top in the center is a large, dark, insectoid tower. Covered in plants and living particles, something is writhing on top of them. It's something that resembles a person. A woman, to be exact. A large webbed tree trunk is straight through the lady's stomach. She's moving around just fine even though she has no legs and is rooted into the forest. The roots are just part of her body now, if you can even call it a body. There's no life in her eyes or face. She doesn't even seem to have skin as much as just a white film. Is it bark of a tree? Is it skin that's beyond pale? It's not human. She speaks and says her name is Katie, the original researcher of the mushrooms here who we were supposed to meet first. She's the farthest gone of any person we've seen so far, being more abnormality than alive at this point. She says the forest took her in the cycles, along with the others. Her boys, as she calls them, and us of course as well. She affirms she was the one writing the notes back to us. The information we hope for is quite lacking beyond the confirmation that the cycle has always been around. The forest gives credence to something of a higher power. Whatever that higher power is, we've been involved in it since the helicopter landing. Maybe even beyond that. Did the forest bring us here purposefully and knowingly? Katie doesn't give us what we hope for as an explanation, but she does in fact say that there is a radio station in the swamp, and even offers to open the pathing for us so we can make it there. It will take some time, so sadly, our one solace will have to wait until tomorrow. Before resting though, some last checks are in order for the day. Leaving Katie, the first thing we come across going down towards the cocoons is a roar. A massive beast. A bear brought back to life by the forest, but mutilated, fleshy, and sprouty. It comes after the protagonist and swats with its claws. He takes a swipe, causing who knows how much damage. There's no way we could beat this thing, he thinks. There's a slim chance with the axe, but not worth the damage. He runs as fast as possible and meets up with Dima. Dima says no more thoughts are needed now that the cycle is in place. He only needs to eat. Continuing after him along the trail, more heart plants are used for sustenance by the protagonist. He still doesn't know why he eats these, but he does so anyway. Heading back home, one last check of the dog's body near the outpost shows that it's thriving. A mass of roots and sprouts come from its decaying but lively body. What is the end result going to offer? Will it still be a dog? Night falls again, this time feeling far less sane and worried if any peace of mind can ever be retained again. The forest is closing in on him. All hopes are now pinned on the radio station, the only salvation left beyond waiting for whatever's coming. No knock at the door this time in the night. Apparently every visitor we could have seen has already came. Morning has come, if you could even call it that. The air is dark and green, but a new day nonetheless. Leaving the house, a ghastly image fills his eyes. Alexander, Dima, Igor, they're here. They're hovered over a table in the middle of the outpost, with their backs hunched over. They're moving around with great vigor. There's blood coming from the table as the protagonist circles around. What he sees will never leave him, even if he gets away from the forest. They're eating something, all of them, together. Gnawing, pulling, and chewing a living being. A person. A woman. Katie. They are all eating Katie. As a family. When he gets closer, she is indeed still alive. Trembling at the sight and the overload of sensation. Without reason. Without thought, just like with the dog and the plants, the protagonist reaches out and strips a piece of bloody flesh from the body with ease, taking a bite along with them. He screams at himself no at what he just did. All reason is gone, he's acting solely on instinct. Running from the table, he holds the idea that the lack of sleep is what made him do that, but he knows it's because of the forest. The cycle. Not being able to brush that off, but not being able to rest either. He decides to keep going to the radio station. He checks the dog nearby one last time. The plant monstrosity has a womb now growing from the dog's stomach with something inside of it. It's moving around slowly. It's dark now. Instead of checking around anymore, he heads straight to the swamp. Crossing the bridges and overgrowth, the path that was blocked off has opened. The final area of the forest now unlocked. Crossing yet another bridge, we come to reed-filled pools of dirty water. In these pools are creatures with large demonic fish-like faces. Another lifeless sprout bear comes out our way as well. Running from imminent combat, he finds the large wooden human-like structure again still walking towards something. It clearly knows where it's walking, but we don't know, nor do we want to. Beyond that is something different, a pool of water with tentacles coming from it. Trees covered with eyes and cocoons surround it, as long with the usual flora. Lights come out of it, beckoning him in. He knows it goes down to extreme depths. It feels familiar to him, like he's coming home. Shaking off everything that's been happening, he knows it's not time to dwell on thoughts like that before his mission is complete. Circling back to the swamp for one last shot at finding the radio station. It's black as the night comes, and the swamp is huge and dangerous. Taking hits from several creatures in the blackness, night comes and our vision goes completely still. Waking up back at the house, he knows he failed. He didn't find the radio station, and tomorrow is the last day. His last chance before the supposed helicopter may come. He reports what happened today, the cannibalism, the well with tentacles, and the failure. Clearly writing sentences that come from a loss of sanity, these notes are much different than days ago. Chaotic, and just all filled with disposition. He blames the eating of Katie on something inside of him looking out. Ranting and raving with a much less controllable madness, it's hard to tell if there's still a chance or if he's too far gone, but one last shot remains as morning comes once again. Leaving the house, he's greeted by a dog. He's known this dog all his life, he thinks to himself. He remembers the memories from when he was younger and they'd play together. This was the same dog. He also is aware this must be what he was birthed from that sack below the outpost. How is that possible? This is his dog. It's here with him and moving around joyfully. Searching the thing down below, the carcass is indeed busted open with whatever that wound was eviscerated. The dog follows us around for a bit, but he doesn't have time to play with him. Leaving his friend, he makes a beeline for the swamp, leaving no time to waste or room for error. He arrives, and after searching the maps, he goes to the corner that he missed this time. Going up the path, he sees a clearing. It's there. It has to be. Finally, after all this time, the radio station is in sight. He sees the wooden idols resembling humans, larger now, completely covered in tree life. They look like they have reached their destination, fully one with the forest now. They are outside the broken radio station's door like effigies. It's broken down, destroyed, nothing remains inside but a wooden, empty cabin, long since past. The radio station is gone. Hope is gone. Beasts come out from the ground and attack. He fends them off, but for whatever reason, it might be better to be eaten now. Grabbing more hearts off the plants around the area, he staves off the feelings of decay. Up above the radio station is an amorphous glob. On closer inspection, it's them, the villagers of the outpost, Alexander, Dima, and Igor. They are one creature, one entity. They are one with the forest now. Their faces are barely recognizable, coming from the writhing mound they've combined into. Everything is coming to a close. This cycle is ending now. Returning to the well one last time, he remembers that his dog from his village was thrown in here. How is that possible? What village? He ran away then and didn't save his dog then. Maybe he can now if he jumps in, he thinks to himself. Without getting clarity towards whose thoughts are in his head, if they are his own or someone else's entirely, he doesn't care. He jumps in the watery hole to the depths below. It's dark down here. Watery holes cover the ground. Small blue candles and wisps line the large open area. It's near impossible to see without them. The moist air fills the dank channel as he climbs and dredges forward through the darkness. Following candle by candle, his feet drenched from the water beneath him. Then at the end of this long path of lights, he sees something lit up. When he gets closer, he realizes it's his house, the one he's come to know so well in this forest. He enters, and his typewriter awaits him. He puts his last thoughts down about his dog, the radio station, the people, and the depths he entered. Everything is done now, his report finished, his mind gone. There may be more than one mind inside of him, but all are the forest now. This cycle is at its end. The forest, crawling with alien overgrowth and demonic plant life, has completely taken over. New creatures, animated straight out of the ground, roam about. Spores fill the dark, musty air outside. There is only one place to go now. The protagonist walks towards where he was dropped off at, curious for the helicopter. He looks dreadfully ill now, his eyes glassy and white, sprouts coming from his body. He is beyond human now. Is there a life for him if he were to return? Does he even want to return? Is it him that would be returning, or someone else? There is no helicopter once he arrives. Salvation never came, but something is in the clearing. Someone. Himself. The entity looks like he did when he arrived, sane and clean. His now inhuman self walks forward and talks to the entity that's mimicking him. The entity states that the cycles are unneeded now. She won't come to date. She isn't born this time. The entity is done with us. It tries to explain what we are. It says we are the result. People's curiosity has sprouted in us and we began to care. We tried to learn and we are able to grow a mind from that. And that's good. The Forest of Lights is dangerous, and it's good that the cycles of knowledge have ended. Now there will be others. The forest from the depths below gave birth to everything we've seen around. It tells us what to grow, eat, and do. Needing anything else is ridiculous. The creatures from the forest are one sprout. Humans are sprouts of the Forest of Light. The entity claims that it wishes to absorb the Forest of Light without it knowing. After hearing this, we fall to the ground, sickly and finished. Our cycle is done now. The person who resembled us walks forward toward the outpost as the alien forest encroaches and grows outward towards human society. The end of humanity and the Forest of Lights is coming, but it may also be a new beginning. The final cycle has begun. Rooten, for such a small indie horror game, had such a great, compact, and very well-written story. It's rare to find games that actually match Lovecraft's tone and storytelling, and this was one of my favorite instances of an original story that did just that. It was a great find, and the perfect game to start off with for this video series. This video is part of a larger series that I'll be doing where I cover the stories of lesser-known indie horror games. If you want more of that, and you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe. We post indie horror and general indie content near daily. Thank you to Amortiz Games for developing Rooten, and for those of you that want to just play the game, go check it out on Steam. Bye!